My skin still crawls just thinking about this guy even. He saw me shopping for school supplies and things for my new apartment one evening during my first week of grad school and apparently decided that I was his mark. So I just moved to my new college town, didn't even have a cell phone yet after leaving the one my folks paid for during undergrad behind. I was grown and could take care of myself though. Eye roll, right? What a nitwit I was. As I left the parking lot with my purchases though, I noticed this truck pull up behind me at the exit. It was late and there weren't too many people out. I pulled out and so did he. It was a few miles down a long retail street with lots of stoplights before my turn. As I drove, I realized the guy in the truck was trying to get my attention. I was in a relationship, so I just ignored him thinking that he was trying to hit on me or something. Over the next few miles, he kept trying to get me to look at him. Some red lights he would end up sort of ahead of me, some behind or beside me. At every light though, he sort of positioned himself so that he could stare at me, either directly or in one of his mirrors. His gaze was unwavering and my anxiety really rose because of that. He was driving sort of oddly too, speeding up close to my bumper that is, hitting his brakes when he was right in front of me, swerving close to my car a couple of times even. Finally, at a red light where he was beside me, I glanced over and absolutely started to panic when I was met with an unbelievably empty, unwavering stare and realized that he was actually, fiddling with himself. He was getting off on the fact that I was terrified, and he was following me, and he was trying to force me to pull over. At one point, I scooted through an intersection on a hard yellow, a couple of cars ahead of him, thinking that I could shake him. Nope. He went around those cars at the light and ran the red to get back in front of me. A freeway entrance ramp was coming up, and I tried to fake him out by putting on my signal and getting into the merge lane for it. He took the bait and started up the ramp. I quickly got out of the merge lane and continued straight. Again, I hoped that I could lose him, but he drove his truck down the embankment to keep following. At another light, where he was beside me, I pulled through the light and then turned to the last possible second, but he made a U-turn and ran another red to follow me. My panic really ramped up at that point. With no cell phone, no sense of direction in a new city, I really didn't know what to do. So I just sort of turned on classic rock and forced myself to sing along and forced myself to go the speed limit so I wouldn't crash out of terrified stupidity. I also decided to drive to the supermarket across town because I remembered it had a police station in it. And he followed me all the way there. Thankfully, though, he burned out of the lot as soon as he saw all the cop cruisers parked out front. I filed a report and asked for a police escort home. I insisted for this too because, I don't know, something told me that this creep was waiting for me to leave the police station. And he was. As soon as I pulled out, I saw him. I pulled over and I told the officer following me, and he went after him, but the truck had taken off and the cop couldn't catch him. But thankfully, the police got the surveillance video from the first store. It turned out that this jerk had been dogging me the entire time that I was shopping. I saw him on surveillance footage just following me through the store. I saw him follow me out, close enough in fact to grab my elbow. I saw footage of him circling the lot in his truck, waiting for me to pull out when I took too long to unload my cart. And quite frankly, my heart sank. I was able to remember 6 of the 7 digits of his plate and the make and model of his truck. In the end, though, the cops did basically nothing. They said it was a he said, she said sort of situation, since the surveillance video didn't actually catch him doing anything particularly unlawful, and was a losing case to try and charge him with anything. I ended up trading vehicles with a friend for a couple of months to try to feel safer, and I went on with my life. I had no idea what this disgusting human did just a handful of months later, until almost 15 years had passed. So I was watching a Discovery ID show about the kidnapping and murder of Sandy Jeffers, and I almost fell out of my seat when I saw the mugshot of her killer. Aaron Lee Skeen. Because it was him, no doubt in my mind. I was also just so disgusted that law enforcement did nothing in my case that I tracked down the investigator in the murder case for, and after verifying some things about his vehicle that were changed in the TV reenactment to weed out people making crap up, she took my contact info finally and an official statement. She could neither confirm nor deny that my run-in was with Skeen, but qualified her statement by saying, "At least you don't have to worry about him anymore because he got life without parole." I only wish that something would have been done when he terrorized me, and I don't know, perhaps things would have been different for Sandy. This was about 8 years ago now, and I was living with my mum and stepdad in Devon, England, after getting really sick a year before and having to move in with them to be looked after. I was about 22 or 23 years old at the time. My mum had moved into the house about 3 years earlier, and my stepdad, who was already with my mum, had moved in about 8 years earlier. Now, I never really liked this house. It was what we would say is a new-built house in the UK, and is on a large development site that has about 100 houses, which are all built in the same 5 designs over and over again. The house is a detached house with a dead-end road outside, and then beyond that, a green strip of trees and bushes before an iron railing fence, and then another road. It's a really quiet area. There is the occasional car, but not constant traffic noise, which I'm actually more used to having grown up in a city in Wales. As I have said, I never liked the house though. There were 3 doors into the house: the front door, the side door, and French doors out of the conservatory. There was also a garage that was built into the house and had an entrance to the house near the kitchen. My mum has actually had this remodeled recently, and it's bricked over into an office room. And I just never really liked how many doors were going into the house. My stepdad travels a lot for work, and my mum sometimes goes with him. I like them going away for a few days because I had the house to myself with just the cat, and I got some independence, which I missed after getting sick, but I never slept well when I was on my own in the house. Instead, I would just sort of stay up late in the night and catnap with the light on in the hallway, and my bedroom door open so that I could open my eyes and look straight at the top of the stairs. Now, one night they were away, and it was about 2 a.m, and I was sitting on the sofa in the living room with my laptop and only one lamp on right behind me. Every door was locked, and I double-checked them twice before I was comfortable in closing the curtains, which are really heavy and don't let light in or out, so I'm pretty sure that no one could see the light that was on behind me as the living room door was mostly closed. I was stretched out on the sofa with my laptop on my lap, and at my feet the cat was asleep. I'm not really sure what I was doing on my laptop. Maybe studying, or more likely scrolling through Tumblr or something, but as I sat there, the cat stirred and lifted her head, tilting it towards the front door. I couldn't really see the front door from where I was sitting because of the living room door being pushed, and to be honest, when the cat woke up at first, I wasn't really paying attention. She's quite a timid cat who gets startled at pretty much nothing, or maybe seeing something, I don't know, but the cat stirred properly, still looking intently at the living room door still, and as I finally paid attention to her, I noticed that the hallway beyond the door was lit up by the porch security light through the glass window in the front door. I was wary, but not overly worried straight away because I had noticed that the light comes on when foxes run past the house before. I got up and moved towards the living room door, but before I opened it, I could hear the handle of the door being very slowly pulled down. It was an old wooden door sort of thing, rather than the PVC doors you get usually. It was a pretty basic lock, and I had locked the door, removed the key earlier, and put across these really flimsy bolts at the top and bottom across. But I could hear the handle definitely being really slowly pulled down because it squeaked slightly, and then the barest rattle of the door happened, and at that moment, I was terrified. I picked up my mobile from the coffee table really quick and preloaded 999 into it. That's like 911 here, so I just had to press call if need be before opening the living room door. The porch light was still on, and through the glass, which was frosted, I could now see the outline of a man standing to one side of the door, and the handle was pressed all the way down. I sort of just froze for a second, and I had no idea how to react. The handle was obviously not opening the door, but he wasn't letting go, and I could see the door move very slightly as he seemed to push against the door. I finally shouted out something along the lines of, "Oi, what do you think you're doing?" And the handle snapped back quickly, and I stepped into the hall so that he could see me through the glass like I could see him through it. There was a pause of what felt like the longest 5 seconds of my life of us just sort of looking at each other, and then the outline ran back up the driveway, and it was too dark to see where he went. Obviously, I didn't sleep that night at all, and kept going around making sure the doors were all still locked. When my mum and stepdad came home the next day, and I explained what had happened to my mum, she thought that maybe it had been some drunk coming home from the pub and getting the wrong house or something, and she told me not to worry about it too much. A few years later, after I moved back to Wales and my mum stayed alone in the house when my stepdad went away again, she was lying in bed on her laptop with the cat, same cat mind you, lying at the top of the stairs at about 1 a.m. My mum had her bedside light on, but no other lights in the house on, and as she watched, the cat stirred suddenly and looked down the stairs directly at the door. My mum got up to see what she was looking at, and looking down to the front door, she could see through the glass someone trying to handle again, as she slapped the lights on as quickly as she could and yelled down at them. Whoever it was also scampered away. Now, I'm really not sure if the two instances are linked at all considering the time frame between them, but if the person or people who keep trying to enter my parents' house could just please go away and leave us alone, that would be great. So a little bit of context to help this story flow. My parents got divorced when I was 10, female, years old, and my brother was 8. They had bought a house in a fairly big land and decided to split it. The house was demolished and my mum was building a new house to live with me and my brother. But we lived in a very small city that is known for its safety. But fast forward to when I was 15, now I'm 25, and the house still wasn't really ready. Me and my brother and my mum lived in an apartment really close to where they were building the house, so we would check it out from time to time. It was an evening when me and my mum were getting back from the market and decided to go check the house. But as we were parking in front of the house, the car lights shone on a man trying to jump the fences to get in. Obviously, I was really freaked out, but my mum stepped out of the car and shouted to the man, "Oh, what the heck are you trying to do?" It was an old guy, maybe in his late 60s. He was really tall, white and skinny. He was starting to bald, having hair just on the sides of his head. He had some really creepy vibes about him too, but he jumped over the fence and looked kind of scared. He wasn't expecting someone to show up, I suppose, because nobody lived in that place yet. He said that he lived in the apartment building next to the house and he was trying to cut down a branch from a tree that was knocking on his window. So my mum said that he was trespassing and if he wanted to do something in her house that he should have contacted her. She yelled at him to get out of here and never come back, and he went home and never really talked about it. A few months later, my family finally moved into that house. It's a cute house with lots of trees and space for my dogs to run free. At that time, we had 3 dogs, 2 small ones and a border collie that we rescued. Every day, we could hear a teenager female voice yelling at the apartment building next to our house. We eventually figured out that it was just some teenage drama because we could hear them saying things that every teen had said to their parents, like, "I don't want to live here," or "You don't get me at all." So we didn't think anything about it, to be honest. Some time had passed, though, and my best friend moved to an apartment in that building. She said that she could hear the teen yelling at her father. And yep, guess who that father was? The man that was trying to get inside of my yard. That admittedly freaked me out a little bit, but I didn't have any proof that he was doing something to her. One evening, though, I was eating some fruit in the front of my house with my dogs, and I heard some screams, like a man and a woman were fighting. I looked around and figured out that it was coming from the building next to my house, and as I looked to the building, I saw a woman falling from a balcony, but couldn't see if anyone had pushed her. So I quickly called an ambulance, and they were really fast at getting here and taking her to the hospital. At the same time, the police came and took a man that I couldn't get a good look to see if it was the same man that trespassed here. And I didn't really figure out what happened that day and who that man was. My dad eventually started building his house next to my mum's. I spent a lot of time in my best friend's apartment that was just by the creepy man's apartment. But as I said, my yard was filled with trees, and sometimes we could see animals there, like lizards, snakes, foxes, possums. This day, though, me and my friend were in a balcony and could see a lizard walking on the wall that separated my house and the building. As we were watching this lizard, though, in the balcony next to hers, that creepy man showed up, with a gun no less, and tried to shoot that lizard. We started screaming at him like, "What are you doing, and why are you killing that lizard? Stop!" He looked at us surprised. I guess that he thought that he was alone. He didn't say anything, though, and just went back into his apartment. I told my dad about it, and he said that I shouldn't interact with that man. I was 18 at this point, and things started to calm down. Or so I thought. It was an afternoon around 4 o'clock, and I was home alone. I decided to go for a walk with my border collie dog. She's really sweet, and I used to ride my bike as she followed me running, so that's what I was doing. As we were coming back to my house, just passing by the building, that same man throws a really big rock at my dog. She was running, so the rock hit her leg. I cursed at him to get back into his house, looking at my dog to see if she was hurt. I told my mum, and she said that I shouldn't walk past that house ever again. Some days later, I actually found a really cute but skinny cat at my college. I was sitting down smoking, and this cat jumped into my lap. I came back to watch a class with him in my lap, and he slept through the whole class, and I came back home with him. He was orange and sort of fierce, as he was a bit of a street cat before, and we let him go for walks in my street and whatnot. Pretty much everyone liked him. He was really friendly and asked for everyone to pet him. People even ended up letting him in their houses and frequently sent my mum pics of the cat in their yards or on their sofas and whatnot. So we never thought that he was really bothering anyone by walking around. At this point, though, we had totally forgot about the violent nature from our neighbour. And at one point, my family went on a trip to visit my grandma, and my dad stayed to take care of the pets. And he said that one night in particular, he heard some footsteps around his house, but as he walked out of the front door, he couldn't see anyone. He thought that it was just the dogs messing around, and eventually he went back into his house to get some sleep. But when we came back, we realized that one of the trees in my mum's backyard was actually dying. It was a really big tree too, and we think it's like 100 years old at least. This tree is the biggest one in the yard, and it was always just so beautiful, so it was really disappointing to see it in this sort of state. I should mention too that this is the tree that the man was complaining about the first time that we met him. So my dad went to look at the tree and figured out that it actually had a lot of sort of holes in it. He said too that this was actually a common way to get poison inside the tree to kill it. He also said that we probably shouldn't tell my mum because it was likely to scare her and make her really sad because the trees were the main reason that she bought that place. And in the end, I just never really told her about it. Some time passes though, and me and my brother moved out to another town to finish our studies. I wanted to take my cat with me, but my mum said that it was going to be hard for him to adapt living in the apartment. He liked walking around the neighborhood so much and visiting other people that, in the end, I just sort of agreed that she should stay with him. A few days later, she visited me and said that, unfortunately, my cat had actually died. I was broken. I mean, how did this happen? Allegedly, she found his neck broken in front of the apartment building next to our house, and his head was just completely twisted. But my cat was allegedly still alive at this point. As she arrived at the vet, though, she unfortunately passed away. She said that she thinks it was that man that killed him. We don't have any proof, but you know that feeling when you just sort of know it? Well, I cried a lot that night, and just writing about it makes me feel teary again. He was my first cat, and he was a really sweet boy, and it's just really unfortunate that he went that way. My mum still lives in the same house. She actually has 5 cats now, but none of them are allowed out. That man still lives next door to her as well, and I'm with her during quarantine, and I see him all the time. You know, lately he's been walking past our house a lot, and also trying to look inside maybe to see if somebody's in there. I don't know what this guy's problem is, and I don't know if it's actually him who's done all these things because, well, we haven't been able to prove it, but like I said, I feel like it is him. We did install some cameras and even hired a security system, but nothing has come of it. But we're sort of at a loss for now, and I don't know. What do you guys think we should do? So due to the quarantine, my dad and I wanted to get out of the house and get the bikes rolling for a couple of days. Last Thursday, we locked up the house, packed up the saddlebags, fired up the bikes, him on a 58 Panhead and me on a Triumph, if anyone's interested, and rode up the Blue Ridge Parkway to the National Forest. Since all of the state park campgrounds are actually closed, we set up the tents in a little private campground by the river, in a fairly remote place. The railroad tracks cut a path through the woods and it stretched into the distance. We passed through the nearest town hours ago. That night, after the fire was embered and my dad had retired, I was sitting by myself just texting some friends. My phone was running out of juice and I wanted to give my boyfriend a call before it died, so I walked to the other side of the clearing, staring into the darkness of the tree line. And it was then that I began to feel just a sense of unease, like I was being watched through the trees. I sat on a stump by the tracks and glanced down the rails, and then I caught sight of a dark silhouette against the starry night sky, and the moon reflecting off the slick tracks. I squinted, thinking that it was just the trees playing tricks on me, right? But then it moved, and that was when the dread hit me. Like when you're hiking through the woods and you spot a grizzly bear ambling across the trail or something. But it was a distinctly humanoid figure, with a thin torso and spindly limbs. No discernible facial features. It was about 30 yards away, crossing the tracks away from me. I stumbled back and quickly fell on my butt, but when I got up, it was just gone. I went back to the tent shortly after that, and I didn't sleep at all that night. Now, it may have been some sort of a dream or hallucination or mirage, but I don't know. I think that I definitely saw something. I've never been back to that place, and quite honestly, I don't know if I ever will, but it's something that I'll never forget. This story is from my days as a gas station clerk. I have tons of stories too, but most of them are just a little bit bizarre or sometimes even funny. There were a few eerie moments, but this was the only time that I was genuinely scared. So this happened during a football Saturday, so the store was full of people from the moment that I walked in. Most of the night it's a blur because it was just cashiering for the first 6 hours of my shift, but it was around 3 a.m. and things were finally starting to taper off. There were only a dozen or so people in the store left. I usually just kept my head down and focused on the transactions in front of me so I wouldn't get overwhelmed. Only really looking up now and then to make sure that the store isn't on fire or something and nobody's stealing the wine case. I wasn't even looking around, to be honest, when I saw him. I just saw something strange in the corner of my eye at first and spun my head to look at him. When I got a good look, I was startled to say the least. Both of his eyes were completely red, like wet cherry tomatoes bulging out of his face. I've never seen anything like them since, too. His skin was almost translucent white, and he was soaking wet. His teeth were gritted, too, and looked way too big for his mouth. He was shaking as he fast walked past the counter. I could hear the bathroom door slam from around the corner. I went back to my transaction and told myself that I needed to remember exactly where he was. I couldn't forget that he was in that bathroom, in other words. I rang out the next few people watching for him the whole time. After about another 10 minutes or so, the store was suddenly empty. Customer rushes tend to be like that anyway, from 100 miles an hour to pretty much just nothing. But I knew that he was still in that bathroom. I actually thought about going to knock, but I sort of felt repelled. You can call me a coward if you want, but I know exactly how 5'6" doughy and totally alone I am where I'm at work. I had no intention of going near that door. But this is where things get stupid on my part. It's difficult to capture exactly what my thought process was. Partly it was paranoia, I'll admit. I was telling myself that maybe this guy had a gun or a knife and he might run out of the bathroom and murder me or something. That was definitely not going to happen, but the scariness outweighed the probability. On the other end of the spectrum, though, there's the part of me saying, you've worked this kind of job for like 2 years now, nothing bad ever happens. You're just making a big deal out of nothing. This honestly seemed fair. I mean, people have threatened to jump the counter before, to follow me home, or to wait until I get off work, and it never really happens. And I mean, if I genuinely believed that bad things would happen, I wouldn't be willing to work minimum wage to spend all night alone here. I look at the clock and it's nearing 4 a.m., which is when I need to start brewing coffee for it to be ready when my manager comes in. The coffee grounds are all in the supply closet behind the counter, so I tell myself that it's totally fine to go and get them. It satisfies both my paranoia and my arrogance as well. I'm still doing my job, but doing something that I believe to be tactically the best move. If for whatever reason the guy opened the bathroom door and tried to run behind the counter and murder me, I could shut the door quickly and lock it from the inside. Besides, the bathroom doors are old and loud. I can easily hear them open from inside the closet, so I can just come out and wait near the panic button until he leaves. This all seemed like a pretty good idea to me at the time. So I decided to go get the coffee packets, and I'm listening carefully while I load up all the flavors I need. I figure that I'll only be a minute, so I don't even turn the lights on. I'm listening carefully, and I don't hear anything. I still don't hear anything. But then I hear a really weird noise. It sounds sort of like the water pipes in the back hissing at first, but it's too ragged, if that's the right word. I suddenly realize that the noise is breathing, and it's getting louder. Then it's right on top of me. Oh crap, I tell myself. I need to get out of this closet right now. That's when I stood and turned to leave, and saw him in the doorframe. In that moment, all I really remember thinking to myself was, oh my goodness, I am so stupid. I'm going to die and it's going to be all my fault. Later, when my manager reviewed the footage, she saw him leaving the bathroom by slowly pushing the door open. Without making a sound, he had wandered behind the counter and peeked into her office, stepping in far enough to trigger the automatic light. After that, he had wandered behind the food service counter before making his way to the open supply closet door. The next thing that she saw on the camera was me absolutely flipping out. I stepped backwards, my body completely shaking so hard that my knees almost buckled. At this point, I think he realized just how absolutely horrifying this entire scenario was for me. He put up his hands and started apologizing awkwardly. He was really twitchy though, still gritting his teeth and his eyes were still bright red. I basically went onto autopilot for a moment and said that I wasn't about to talk to him until he got out from behind the counter area. He walked backwards until he was barely on the other side of the employees-only entrance, standing next to the soda machine. He began asking for an iPhone charger, telling me that he was lost. He said that he had no money and just needed to charge his phone here until he could call for help. I told him that I don't have an iPhone charger and I couldn't help him. But he sighed and looked down for a moment, seeming to think about what to do. Then he flipped his head back and screamed as loud as he could, the F word just over and over again, and punched the soda machine so hard. I backed up instantly and ran around the counter up to where the panic button was under the register. I watched him as he walked around the store, punching the walls and kicking the counters and just screaming at the top of his lungs. I heard myself shouting over and over, "Get out, I'm calling 911. After a second, he stopped and turned around to look at me. He quietly apologized before just wandering out of the store and running off into the dark. At this point, I was shaking, but I tried to pick up and keep working. I started brewing the coffee, checking the windows to see if he was out in the parking lot, but I couldn't see. After another few minutes, a regular came in and told me a strange man had come up to him asking for a ride. He said the guy was soaked and his eyes were bright red, and that was the moment when I decided to call the police. They actually found him in the parking lot next door, screaming and punching the moving trucks, apparently. They took him to sober up and calm down. They informed me that he was very sorry for losing his cool. He was just very drunk and very lost, allegedly. He had come from out of state for the game and got separated from his friends. Another regular assured me that I was an idiot for going into a small room with one exit, nowhere near a panic button when I thought that there might be a dangerous person in the store. I totally deserved that, I know. In the end, though, I was safe, but it did make me realize that something easily could have happened. I'm not as safe as I think I am, and, anyone could have come into the supply closet that night, so I guess that I'm glad that it was him and not somebody much, much worse.